And where does he live, Sid? Auckland. Where's Josie? But she can't even hear.
She's doing some writing.
Oh, okay. Where? She's deaf as a doorpost.
I know.
Yeah, maybe it's just a... oh well. Right. Oh. Tēnā koutou I te whānau. Kua tai mai nei ki tērā wā. Ka kōrero mātou ki ngā kōrero I roto I ngā puka o te kōti Māori. Me ngā kōrero o ngā marae o Ngāti Hau. He mihi tēnei kia koutou katoa. I taku hia I tōku mutunga e mōhio koutou oku nei kōrero. Nā, tēnā koutou katoa. So, kia ora everybody. And so this morning, I suppose just to put in some background to things, is that I just want to talk about, before we get on to talking about the whenua and different things, we'll be going through a little process of some of the kōrero for Ngāti Hau. And hopefully from that to come down to us ourselves where we are. So for me, the kōrero that I am talking about talks about, I've got to get my papers because I'm not that good at just, talks about retrieving memories. And that's the big part of my mahi is about retrieving memories. And it's retrieving memories of our tūpuna, retrieving memories of our whenua, and all those things that are there on our whenua, and retrieving kōrero, and mahinga of our own whānau, and that as well. The other is to archive our tribal losses that we have, because we're not an isolated group on our own at Te MARUATA. We're part of a bigger picture. And then the other is using that information for decolonisation methodologies. And so that decolonisation is finding ways to decolonise ourselves through peaceful means, not through violence, as happens in a lot of other countries. So where to start? When I first came home, so there's a couple of things that I when I came home. And prior to coming back home here, I'd been part of Mana Motuhake with MARUATA. I'd been part of the Labour Party and in the Māori section. I'd been part of the Māori and Pacific Island group in Auckland that did community work in Auckland. I'd been sort of in campaign for nuclear disarmament, so that I had my own whakaaro about what I thought should be happening for us, for my family in the first instance. And I was really surprised when I came back to find out that my grandfather and his father weren't spoken of at all in amongst Ngāti Hau. And I sort of thought, oh, I wonder why that is, as you do. You know, I wonder why, because usually when nobody gets spoken about, it means that you do nothing. And so I started asking questions, and at that time Uncle Ben and them were alive. And the only one that sort of made any sense to me was Grandpa Wiri Kake. But, you know, you had to really listen to him because he couldn't speak properly. You know, he sort of spoke in a... Well, I don't know how he spoke, but he sort of... His voice was soft, but his English wasn't that good, and his Māori wasn't good at all, and it all got all jumbled up. But all he used to say about not my, so if I say my, I'm sorry, about our great-grandfather was that, you know, that he was a tapu old man, that man. And I used to think to myself, oh, okay, I know what tapu means, but what do you mean? And he, he was a tapu man, that one. And so I sort of decided to start reading, you know, trying to get as much information that I could. And it wasn't for a while, really, that I realised that he was the lay reader, the first lay reader at Pehiaori, and that he was also, there was something else he was there to do with that, with the church. And I thought, my tupuna is really, you know, my tupuna is important. And my tupuna was important to me because in those days, anyone who was involved in the church at the level that he was involved in meant that he knew a lot about the church and about different things that were happening in the church.
Sorry, can I just ask, are you referring to Parata?
Oh, I'm talking to Parata Minarapa. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And so I kept on asking, but again, in amongst Ngāti Hau, and I don't know if some of us are still remember, nobody really knew much about Ngāti Hau. And these are the old kaumata and that. And so I asked myself, well, I wonder why that is. And and then I asked, one day I was talking to Uncle Ben, and I asked Uncle Ben about our grandfather. You know, and he sort of laughed, Uncle Ben, and, you know, and I thought, well, what was it? And he said, when your great-grandfather died, your grandfather, he burnt, and I haven't got a copy here, but I've got a copy of the kota that they used to have, that he used to live in, our great-grandfather. And so our grandfather, Parata Minarapa, he burnt it, and there were also on the block different places where some of Ngāti Hau used to live. So there were old kainga and things like that and at that time, and I thought, I wonder why. I know now, it's because they had no land to go to. And so and our grandfather, our great-grandfather, Parata Minarapa, was the last one to pass away. That's when our grandfather burnt the kota. And so, and Uncle Ben said, oh, you should have seen that night. He said, the fire just lit the whole sky. He said, you could see it for, you could see it for a long way. He said, we all came over to watch when they were little kids. And so, for me, that was a start in terms of our grandfather. And then, as I kept reading some other stuff, our great-grandfather, Parata Minarapa, they used to have this committee in those days. This is back in 1897. And on these committees, they had, I've got a copy in there, and later on I'll pass it around so people know what I'm talking about. But they had all the area in Taitokero, and they had everybody that was associated with the different churches. And how they used to go to these meetings, all these people. And when I saw our great-grandfather's name, and I thought, oh, well, you weren't just a sedentary person that stayed in one place. You had been to all these other places as well. So it settled me. That settled me. And then I started going to our Ngāti Hau, Pihiauri, and Ngāti Hau meetings. And then I sort of, what? And then I found that nobody knew who we were. So everybody knew that we were Ngāti Hau, but nobody knew where we come from. So it took a really, really long time even for me to find out where we came from. And so my understanding of Ngāti Hau, where we come from, is from Omanaya. And in Omanaya, there are two places there. One is by the marae down the valley, and another place is before you get to Omanaya, there's a road called Duddy's Road on your right-hand side. And that goes up to the back, and it goes up to the back to Waima, to the Waima River. So there had been a disagreement between two brothers. And our tūpuna, who's called Kahukuri, he decided to leave Omanaya. So when he left Omanaya, the people that went with him were the majority of Ngāti Hau that were down the valley. And there was also a contingent of Ngāti Kaharau who lived up at Duddy's Road. All the same whānau, all the same people, both from the same areas, but they all moved with him, looking for a kāinga for them. Now, looking for a kāinga in those days wasn't unusual, because Hine Amaru and her father Turungare, that's what they did. They went looking for a kāinga because they didn't have a kāinga as well, and they ended up from Hokianga over at Waioomio. So this kōrero about Ngāti Hau and Ngāti Kaharau is a kōrero that they talk about at Omanaya. Now, about 20 years ago, Pihiauri and Whakapara, they all went to Omanaya to have a meeting with the people in Omanaya. Trouble is, they had the meeting with the wrong people, and they weren't given the proper explanation of things. And when they did go over, the people who would have been able to give us the proper kōrero had passed away. But this kōrero that I'm talking about now is kōrero that they've retained in Omanaya and who know what happened. So, you know, we've got, and what's happened in Whangarei is that we've tended to emulate ourselves, Ngāti Hau, and not really look at the bigger picture, at Hokianga. And so, and I know that in a lot of our Ngāti Hau, what do you call it, in our letterheads and things like that, that they've got things like, you know, people have put names to things that really weren't there. So it's making your own history. So I thought, well, rather than me make our own history too, so one of my kōrero is to make sure that I get information that's verified in some respect, that includes our own tūpuna, that includes kōrero that someone can go and check themselves. And I found that the Māori Land Court books, the minute books, for me, that's where I found out about who we are, who I am, who our grandparents are, what relatives we have, you know, what uri there was, all of these things. And ours is a very sad, I believe ours is a very sad story, because of the way our land went. And the Ngāti Hau land went rather quickly, and later on we'll see that when we look at the land blocks. But I just really feel that in some way it's important that even when we're looking at our marae, that we remember those things about who we are, where we come from. Because if we don't, and we get people coming in, and they'll be like, oh, where did you fellas come from? You know, that sort of kōrero. And we need to be able to answer that. And I know in our marae currently, a lot of it is hit and miss. Where do you come from? And, you know, sort of, yes, well, and making sure that you get your stuff verified has been important to me too. Because in the land court, and although, so I'm not saying that the information in the land court is 100%, it's not. It's also, there's a lot of information that's not there. Some of it is biased, but it's the one record, it's one place of, you know, record we've got where we're able to look at information and compare it to other things people have written, not only in the Māori Land Court, but also in a lot of the books and writings that Māori authors have written. In looking at Hokianga, at Omanaia, it's important for us too to know our links with Rahiri, because that's how we come through as being Ngāti Hau. We don't come through some person in space. We come through that whole whakapapa with Rahiri and his sons, and you know, and their moitahi, their wives, and those relationships. And also, when we're thinking about Hokianga, we need to also fill our own minds with the history of Hokianga, and that rich history that's part of us. And the only reason that it's no longer part of us is because we've moved the goalposts, you know, for want of a better word. And people in Hokianga know who Ngāti Hau are. So it's not like in Hokianga, they go, oh, Ngāti Hau, who's that again? In Hokianga, Ngāti Hau are known. And Ngāti Hau have relationships with all the different hapu in Hokianga on both sides of the river. And you'll find that over in Motiti, some of the kaumātua are there, the older people, some of them are from actually Umanaya. So there's a lot of, and some of them on Umanaya are actually from the other side, like at Whangape and places like that, where Auntie Gladys comes from. So, you know, there's that relationship, those relationships that we have to understand ourselves and to nurture it ourselves and to nurture our children in those histories as well. And listen to me, there's so much information that it's not a hard thing to do at all. And then we come down, I guess, come down to here. And the other thing with Hokianga that I like, it's got the history too about kupe. And so, you know, you've got where we started from, which is over in the Cook Islands, you know, where we started from when we came here. And it's a rich history. It's a rich history of travel. It's a rich history of navigation. It's all those things. And you get to appreciate, when you understand that, you get to appreciate the fact that even here in the Whangarei district, that Ngāti Hau as well had waka. You know, that they used the rivers that we had, that they used the awa, they used the moana, they had allies, they had relationships with different hapu for their survival. Now, a lot of the Ngāti Hau land in Whangarei, it's Ngai Tahuhu land that we conquered. And it's by conquest, it's by occupation, and these are the terminologies that they use in the Māori Land Court. And if you want to, all these terms that I'm saying, Bryn knows these terminologies that I'm talking about. So they're not stuff that, you know, that sort of, I'm saying just today. That's how title to land was determined by, I think there was about 4 or 5 different things that you determined the occupation to land. And then taking a big leap again, and we'll come back here to Whangarei. In 1891, Parata Minarapa was a member of the Pehiauri Committee. Now, at the time of those hui, around that time, a lot of our kainga that we have now were actually papakainga or settlements. They were called settlements, but they were papakainga places. Te MARUATA was a papakainga area. Pehiauri was a papakainga area. Over at Taharoa at Whakapara, that was a papakainga area. So all these little areas that we know of, they actually had quite a lot of each other, and they went backwards and forwards. Nobody stayed static. I mean, the only reason we got to Te MARUATA was when they were partitioning the land. That's how we got to Te MARUATA. We could have lived anywhere at that stage. We could have been living over at Ruapekapeka, we could have been living, who knows. But from the date in the Māori Land Court and the partition of Te MARUATA, that's when we began our settlement at Te MARUATA. And if anybody's got anything else before that that says that we did, well, I'd like to see it, because at those times, Ngāti Hau, well, all tribes were a mobile tribe. They moved, and they moved to where cultivations were. They just moved with the seasons for food, for gathering food. And you'd be surprised at some of the you'd be surprised at some of the places that they moved to and where they gathered food. So one of the special trees, so the rako, different rako, one of the special trees that we had was the hino tree. And I've only just seen a photo of the hino tree. But the hino tree, they made like a bread, they made food out of. And the hino tree was all, in different places. It wasn't like we had a hino grove here at Te MARUATA and we had a hino grove at Pehiawari. A hino grove was like other groves, they were hard to locate. But once you located them, that's where our tupuna travelled to gather that food. It's the same as the kakaberries. Kakaberries were hard to gather too. It's not like the thousands of trees that you could just stand there and they'd fall at you. People had to go and look and find these areas and then sort of say what these areas were, and then that went through the tribe. When we get to talk about the lands too, they'll find that there are some of the things that are named after these. That's why I'm talking about them, after these, what do you call them? After places on the whenua. And, you might think, oh, God, that's not they don't seem to be big or, important. But to our tupuna, they were important as sources of food and places that they could go to. So a lot of the history in the Māori Land Court books, it starts from 1865. So the area now that I'll talk about is around 1865 to about the 1890s. So there's quite a lot of stories, there's heaps of stories actually, but one of the kōrero that has to do with Te MARUATA. And it's about one of our tupuna whaia called Miriana Pea. And Miriana Pea was the mother of Uncle Ben, Kake and them's, a mother of Uncle Ben, Kake and them's a mother. So she was their grandmother. She was a granddaughter of Pumuka and Makarita Rongo, but in his second moitahi, Pumuka, he had two sons, and one of those sons, he was tomo to Miriana Pea. And when her mother died, she went and lived with Rui Taikawa. And I think his house, because I saw a photo the other day, if you have a look at up there at Huinui Orchards and that picture that that they had up there of the orchard there, and then there's you find it, and then there's the Te MARUATA block, and you'll see by the maunga, there's a house there on its own sitting there. And I think that was Rui Taikawa's house. And that's really, when you come out of the entrance of our street, Edgington Road, across that way. And so Rui Taikawa was married, moitahi, and Miriana Pea went to live with them. And she became pregnant, and then she was sent over to Waimio to, I can't remember which, anyway, one of the two sons of Puka, who she was tumu to, and he found out that she was hapu. So they came over, so Pumuka, not the Pumuka, but his sons, they came over to Te Maruata to muru us. And by muru us, they came over and they sort of got cattle, got things like that, and they got, I think there was a greenstone that they got as well, as a sort of payment for the wrongdoing that had happened. And so Miriana Pea, she went to Waiomuyo. She had her baby there at Waiomuyo. And then, when he grew up, when he was just a little baby and grew up, she came back to Te Maruata, and she was brought back by Pumuka, the son, because he was treated really badly at Waiomuyo. So he would have been treated like a nothing over there. And so when he came back, Riwi Taikawa didn't immediately say, he's my son, he's mine. And one of the tupuna then at Te Maruata, they had a big meeting, it's all written down, and they had a meeting, and he said that he would take the boy and he would give the boy his name. So his name was Henare Tanatiu, and you'll see that if you read the successions, to the different tupuna. And he died when he was about 17, Henare, which is really sad, really, because Riwi had passed away just before him, before this young boy had passed away. And the young boy had been given some land, but the house and a whole lot of other things went to his wife and went to others in the family. Not Riwi Taikawa's family. And Riwi Taikawa was from Ngāti, is it Hikaro or Aroha? Is it Hikaro from down Maniapoto? Hikaro. A hapu.
There is, it's that one.
Chitao.
Yeah, I think so. Te Awamutu,
Oh, is it? Well, that's the other side that Riwi Taikawa came from. And he went down there really, and it's all written down, he went there to hide his sin. But he was the one that was actually being trained to be the minister at Pehiawari. But because of what he'd done, he couldn't be that person. And in a way, it's a sad way for a person's life to end. But Riwi Taikawa, what he did do, whenever he spoke in the Māori Land Court, he left kōrero whakapapa. And so he did his whakapapa back up to Kahukuri and Kahukuri's wife. Well, he had Kahukuri had 4 or 5 wives, but the 3 prominent wives, and that's who Riwi Taikawa put his whakapapa back to. And you'll find that those that did, and there's only about three or four, if that, of Ngāti Hau, that actually put their whakapapa to where Kahukuri, and that's as far as they went. So it's not like everybody did, because everybody didn't get an opportunity. And by not having an opportunity, I mean, if you're not part of the group that goes in to be the landowner, whether you're the landowner for yourself or for the hapu, and at the beginning, they were landowners for the hapu. But by the time they got in there, they became the actual landowners and then sold the land. So this happened quite a bit in Ngāti Hau. leaving really a lot of people without whenua. And I talked last night about Horomona Kaiko. Well, when he passed away, his son came to Te MARUATA, to the court hearing, to make a succession to his father. But the land had already gone, it had already been sold. And there are a lot of instances like that in Ngāti Hau. Hinemore, kia ora Hinemore. Hinemore has come, and Hinemore's from over at Ruapekapeka, and she's an Apatera. And one of her tūpuna, Aterea Te Arahi, from the time of, I think it was from the time of Perukake, her father's younger brother was a trustee for them. He was a trustee for all the kake children, became the trustee for their parents, and was a trustee for their parents. So he was a person that, that because of they have a blood tie, because one of Hinemore's whānau, the kake whānau, one of the Keremeneta, who was the oldest of the kake whānau, he had a sister, and the sister is her relation. So, there's all these sort of sisters, brothers all over the place of the whānau. And I think that was Hoana, was the sister to Keremeneta Kake. So when Keremeneta Kake came over here to this side, he lived in Hikaranui. When he came over to Hikaranui, when he came over to Te MARUATA, his family weren't happy with him because he had spent all the money that they'd saved for the stone for Pirini Kake. And they did not want him, they put an application to the court that they did not want him to be, their trustee. So there's instances like that right throughout Ngāti Hau that are sort of just everyday, I suppose, instances. But, it's part of our history, and it's not really to patu each other with that kōrero, but, people just need to take a check of themselves and their tūpuna, rather than think that, 3 generations from their tūpuna, everything was hoki-dori. Well, everything isn't hoki-dori. It's not that way. What else is there? There's other instances. Yeah.
Before you go on, do you want a chair?
I'm all right.
Sure.
Yeah. Why do I look? Eh?
Sit down and just turn the chair around.
No, I'll fall off the sleeve. Hey, come on. Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, it's better standing up, then you can think. If I sit down, it might all go to sleep. But we get to Ngāti Hau and Whangarei. And what we have in Whangarei, we have, and Te MARUATA was never really, for whatever reason, considered as a marae area, and that would have been because it was only our grandfather, our great-grandfather, and it's, and so on your own you can't have a marae on your own. And then our grandfather came along, but that was some time after these others had been said. So what we have, we've got Pehiawari, Whakapara, we've got Akirama, that Hinemore comes from, and then we also have a relationship over in Hokianga, over by Rahiri, with an area called, the names of the block is Whakanikiniki, and the marae there was Marae Nui. But we've never, and I've said to our chair, we need to go up and see them. And that land up there is where tupuna like Patuone, Wakanene, Muriwai, Pāngari, all these illustrious tupuna, where they come from. And their marae at one stage was called the Aroha Marae at Rahiri, but you wouldn't call that a marae anymore. And Whakanikiniki, the block where this marae is, it's not up yet, is opposite Rahiri. And that was gifted by the daughter, by the granddaughter, by Patuone's granddaughter, and her mother was Kātiao. Kātiao oh no, I forget, it's gone. Kātiao, anyway, and she is from Ngāti Hau Kātiao, and the name of her daughter was, oh gosh, it's going. The name of her daughter was, or was she Kātiao? No, she wasn't Kātiao. Anyway, the name of her daughter, I'll remember it another time. Her daughter was a matikiti. So during the time of Te Whiti, her daughter was a matikiti up there, and also a matikiti with two Romana sisters. And she went down to, her name's just eluded me. She went down to Te Whiti and was a follower of Te Whiti. She also, at the Star Hotel in Hawaii, at Kawakawa and in Hawaii, so she was a prophetess. She used to stand there on those balconies and do her kōrero there, do her matakiti mahi there, and talk about things. And then she predicted that at a particular time on a particular day the world would end. Well, it didn't. And when she came back, her father, who had been a supporter of hers, was no longer a supporter. And he became a supporter of the two cousins. But when that gift was made of that block of land to Ngāti Hau, that was when the Ngāti Hau Trust Board was formed, the Marae Board. And our grandfather, Prata Minarapa, and our grandmother were trustees at that time. And that's the reason why I stay in the Trust Board, because they were there and they were part of forming all that. And when that was formed, there were 36 of Ngāti Hau who were members, who were the trustees for those two things, so the Marae and for the Ngāti Hau Trust Board, or Marae Board, sorry, it was called then. And after it was set up, apparently, a couple of years later, it was closed down, the Ngāti Hau Trust Board. And it was closed down because there was a case of misappropriation of funds. And so they had and so the person who was telling me was Ani Karo, and that's Kawi Waipodi. She's passed away now, from Whakapara. And she was saying when she was a little girl, she used to go with her mother to the Ngāti Hau meetings. And Kawi is Tita Whai Harawira's sister. And she used to go with her mother to these meetings, and she said on this particular day, she couldn't understand because everybody was crying. You know, everybody was crying, and they made the big decision then to close all the books up and close the Ngāti Hau Marae Board up. So it didn't operate for several years after that. And it was only really in the 1970s that it was opened up again. And so, you know, little instances like that, it just, how it can just throw the hapu right out of sync with everything. Now, the Ngāti Hau, the Te MARUATA block, it's the only block in Ngāti Hau, and it's one of the very few blocks that's a 10 owner block. And so part of a particular legislation at that time, there were only allowed to be 10 owners in a block of land. And the actual size of Te MARUATA was 560 acres. And and in that there were 10, in the first instance there were 13 tupuna that had been elected to be on Te MARUATA, but that was brought down to 10. So only 10 names went into that mix. And so you have, and the main person at that time who was considered to be like the chief of Ngāti Hau was Haki Whangawhanga, who's the number 1 block where the orchard is. And then the rest was us number 2, and then different ones in the other blocks. But we'll come to that when we do the blocks. And even that, at some stage there was some of the tupuna were opposed to the fact that it was a 10 owner rule, because, you know, when you became a 10 owner rule, it meant that you own the land. And some people didn't want that to happen. You know, it's only like 48 acres, not like it's 5,000 acres. And when they started protesting about Te MARUATA, that's because a whole lot of the other land had been sold and there wasn't much land left. But thank goodness that particular act stayed in place at that time. Who, how, what? What's the time? 20 to 10. Oh, okay. How long do I have to go for?
3 hours.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm rushing things and I shouldn't really. I'm just
Do you want
rushing.
a cup of tea or something, or water?
No, a water. Kia ora. You want to ask any questions? That might be the best thing too. Yeah.
You know, where does Ngāti Hau come from? Does it come from a chief? Was it like, you know, Āti Hine's Hina Amaru over here, right?
Yeah.
So where does Ngāti Hau come from? Does it come from a chief from Mairano or what?
Yeah, it comes from a chief Mairano
So where was the chief?
in Hokianga.
In Hokianga yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And in actual fact, Boss Tipene, and I've got to get it out because I know he's passed away too, but he left the posts on his post for me, and on it it's got that the tupuna of Ngāti Hau goes back further than Rahiri. But you know, I'm not going to talk that because I don't know further than my nose. Do you know what I mean? In whakapapa. So I won't talk about that, but I don't know if there's anybody else that knows how to talk about that. Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
So, does Parata Minarata come from us Omanaya, or where did he come
From Whāngarei. Yeah. And it's not Parata Minarapa, it's Minarapa Paiawa. So Minarapa Paiawa is the tupuna that first was the first tupuna of ours to have land. Yeah. He had Minarapa Paiawa.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could start writing the top name, Yeah, if it can come down. It's got a few generations.
And he was an old man. Okay, so, yeah. He was an old man, Minarapa Paiawa. And he had two. He had two wives. And so he had our great-grandfather, Parata Minarapa, but he also had over at Whakapara another Heteraka. That was his name, Heteraka Minarapa. But Heteraka passed away when he was young. But over at Whakapara, over at Puhi Puhi, they succeeded to land over there. So I think in total was about 400 acres. But, you know, at that time, Puhi Puhi was selling, and there were things like survey charges, and they couldn't keep up with those things. So we lost that block over there in Puhi Puhi 4, which is about 400 acres in total. Yeah.
Because we couldn't keep up with
Well, it's all the money, you know, like even when you made an application to the Māori Land Court, it cost you £5. It cost you, for every word that you did, it cost you another 10 shillings. You know, after a certain number of words, everything costed, and our people had no money except to sell their land. You know, that's where they got their income from. Because prior to that, they had income coming, you know, from their own goods that they had, that they were making, and also from fishing. They were quite successful fishermen that used to go overseas with their fish and stuff like that. But also the flax, and that trade was needed, but it was taken over, and they couldn't afford to maintain them. You know, the whole businesses just went out of their hands. Yeah. Any other questions?
You said, you said he was the first one to own land.
Well, he was the first one for us.
Yeah.
That's the first name that we have.
Oh, okay.
Now, I've tried to look for his whakapapa and I can't find it. You know, and yeah, and so that's one of the things that when I looked, and that was my reason to find out who we were. And then when I couldn't find it, and I thought, well, do I give up? But the thing was, as I kept reading the Land Court Minute Book, everybody else started popping out. You know, so you can't stop people popping out. You know, their names come up, you know, their descendants come up, and you can't stop. You know, because you're not there really for a sole purpose, although that was my purpose in the beginning, was, you know, just myself and my family, but there's a bigger picture. You know, and that's what we've got to remember, there's a bigger picture than ourselves. Even our marae, even though it's there in our little place at Te MARUATA, there's a bigger picture when we get manuhiri. You know, it's a bigger picture. Yeah.
Minarapa Paiawa, was he the first Minarapa for Minarapa Parata or Parata Minarapa?
Yeah, they retained his name.
From Paiawa to Parata?
Yeah. Well, they could, you see, Māori names weren't, to keep a name, that's not a Māori way.
How you can change it?
Yeah, they changed their names. But by the time this had come in, our grandfather, great-grandfather, Parata Minarapa, he was well ensconced in the church. So you behave like a church person. Yeah. And then it just went from there. Now, in Ngāti Kahu, so Taipari was talking to me one day and he said, oh, dearie, where does the parata come in your name? And I said, oh, well, parata. And he said, no, where does it come? I didn't know what he was talking about. So for about half an hour, he's asking me these questions. And I said, well, it was there. Where else would it come from? And he said, no, but where's it from? I said, it's from parata, parata. And he said, dear, it's not the same as my parata. I said, no, it's not, but I said, it's our parata. So I was talking to Waimari. So where the parata comes in, according to Waimari Bruce, in Ngāti Kahu, there's a parata puariri. And she says that that's our tupuna, parata puariri. And opposite the marae there at WHENUA, that block of land apparently is supposed to be ours. But I'm not going to go, hey, that's our land, because there's somebody already on it. But when I looked at, and then I said to her, oh, Murray, but there's no issue. So parata puariri had no issue. And she said, look, there is. And she's got it, and I haven't pursued it yet because, I just need to get this out of the way first. Yeah. And so parata puariri, over at Ngāti Kahu, their tupuna there is matatahi. So that's their, that's their tupuna. So parata puariri is the younger brother of matatahi. So that's all I know about that. And the other thing, and the lands that our grandfather and his sister had over at Ngārara Tunua, that went into the forestry, into the Ngāti Hine forestry. Good fun, eh? Yeah. And I think it was all the small shareholdings that went. Yeah.
So do you know who his wives were?
Only one.
Only one.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Oh gosh, look, and I tell you, it's like I'm not going to Josie. What was her name again? No, we both got it. We both left. We both forgot. Left our. That's all. Yeah.
Hey, over in Ngāti Tunua, a lot of people call themselves Ngāti Hau as well. Are they still part of this Ngāti Hau?
We over at Ngārara Tunua.
Yeah, they regard it as there's a Ngāti Hau in there as well.
Oh, like who?
Well, I was reading in I guess the Mary News book.
Yeah.
And it had that Ngāti Tunua, it had different tribes and had Ngāti Hau in it. And I thought Ngāti Hau would as far as Te Aori and that was it. I didn't know it extended over to there.
Well, Ngāti Hau goes over to Hikurangi, and we share that with Ngāti Kahu. So that's our relationship with Ngāti Kahu at Hikurangi. And the other thing is we go through Keteniko, we go through Keteniko, that way through the whenua of Ngāti Kahu, over to Ruatangata.
You know, when you mentioned that the block of land there, Ngāti Ngāti Hau block, I just thought that those people there on that block might have been called themselves Ngāti Hau.
Oh, no, there's no block of land at Ngārara Tunua.
Isn't there?
No, that's Ngāti Hau.
The one question that I heard about that's Ngāti Kahu, that's from our Ngāti Kahu side.
This is your Friday.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions?
We come down through all the night from down to Wailmio. We come through there as well. So Ngāti Wailmio and Ruatonga there with Malaya. Is that?
No, we came through Orota. That's how we come down. My understanding is we came through Orota, through Pipiwai and over here.
So, when Whenua Parata, where does Tainui come into it?
Tainui, I don't know. I don't know.
Hunt told me that when the old man died, King Koriki came up with a hope up here at Kaukopiki Field.
I don't know. That needs to be, there needs to be somebody to qualify that, to say that, to verify it. I can't, because it's not written down anywhere. But I know that when our grandfather passed away, because I was reading one of those Te Ao books, and I thought, having a look, and then I saw this name, and I thought, I know this person. And having a look, and it's in the, in the bereavement part of it. And it talks about our grandfather, Prata Minarapa, but it calls him Rima Prata, and it talks about him, what he was, and how many people were at his tangi. He was between 200 to 400 people at his tangi, all up there in the old house.
Yes.
And that he was retained by the local farmers and orchardists. He was a stone wall. He was the maker of stone walls, the builder of stone walls. But he was also he was a forestry man as well. And so he had a group of people who got together, and they went down and helped Ngāti Tuwaira do that with the lands, to cut the lands ready for putting houses in. Yeah. Tēnā koe, Ross. Ia miri kia wheme te anō Mary. Bye.
This is not just for the chiefs, is it?
Yes.
We're not talking, are we?
You're next up.
Yeah, we've just been, just been talking about like who we are, where we come from, and why some of the research that's being done, and some of the purposes of the research. And then we're just talking now in general about different kōrero.
So back to when grandfather passed away, was there any mention of him being at the time?
No.
You were at the tangi?
Oh, please! No. No, I wasn't at the tangi.
Grandfather's tangi?
No.
Sorry.
But I did meet the grandparents once. I met our grandmother twice, and I met our grandfather once. And the first time I met them was after my mother had passed away, and I was in a place called the Home of Compassion for Unmarried Mothers in HUI, and they had come to visit me after being to see my, to visit my mum's grave and that. And they came to see me because they wanted to know if Auntie Mihi could take, my baby and adopt my daughter. But that the adoption was already going through to someone else, and that didn't happen. And I spent the day with them. And that was the only time I saw our grandfather. And the second time I saw our grandmother, they came. I used to live out at Oakley with an auntie, and they came out there to see, our grandmother came out there to see if I'd come into whāngarei for Uncle Mummy's 21st. But they wouldn't let me. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And did you come in?
No, my aunties and that wouldn't let me.
Oh.
Well, because I didn't know, and they didn't know. The families just didn't know each other.
They didn't link. Yeah.
No.
So the auntie you were staying with was actually related to...
The auntie that I was living with was not really an auntie. So in Omanaya, I've got a grandmother that's not really a grandmother. But she, from the time I was little, because they used to come to Auckland, and so I was just one of those kids that she just used to take back, and I'd go back, and I grew up there at school holidays. I used to go back there and went to school there, and at different times, yeah. But no, they weren't, but they weren't blood. And my mother had been a best friend of that grandmother's daughter. Yeah.
Friends.
Yeah, they were friends. Yeah.
It would have been cool if you went to Mother's 21st. You could have come to
I know that our grandmother was disappointed that, that I didn't go. And when I was working for Māori Affairs at that time, it was in the 1960s, and Bill Parker, and that's when I met Auntie Edie. But Bill Parker used to tell me that that my grandmother, who my grandmother was, and and he said, "Oh, you should go," and I didn't know where on earth he was talking about. And I remember the day when I did go out there in the 1960s, and it was all gravel road then out to Ringaroo. It wasn't, but I didn't go because I didn't know. You drive and you think, "Well, where am I going?" You don't know where you're going. All you know is somewhere around here is where they live. But I never saw them. At Auntie Edie made, Auntie Edie came. I visited Auntie Edie, and I stayed at Auntie Edie's. At one time, stayed there, and I know Auntie Edie was looking to, make that connection, but I left Māori Affairs and went down to Christchurch after that. Yeah, and it was Auntie Edie when I was living in Hawaii, and she came to see me in Hawaii with Uncle Hone May, and to see if I'd consider coming over and staying in the old house. Because our Tui was going off back to Australia, and that's how I got down here. Through Auntie Edie, really.
You're quite the international traveller, you've been everywhere.
Well, not quite.
It's awesome, Awesome to listen to, so like in Christchurch and up to Hokianga, then Hawaii, and back to MARUATA, and Tikanga.
Well, I didn't have anybody. I know that sounds terrible. But I didn't have anybody. It was just, there's Leone and my dad, and they were. But when I started to go to work, I didn't have anybody. I was really on my own, and I've always felt alone since my mother passed. I've never felt like, never felt sort of with anybody. And since Leone and I have got older, we've got closer. Because Leone was Dad's baby, if you want to, But no, I've sort of, my whole life's been centred around my mother, my thoughts, what I do. I'm doing this really because of my mum, out of some regard and respect for my mother, and the fact that if I'm able to do anything for the family and for her parents, I know that my mum would, she wouldn't stop me. Yeah.
Ko mai tērā ingoa pai awa.
Minarapa Paiawa. That's so at Te MARUATA, that's, so there's Prata Minarapa, our grandfather. There's Prata Minarapa, his father. And there's Minarapa Paiawa, his father.
His father.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's how we get to Te MARUATA.
So the first
Yeah.
pai.
And he had 2 wives, and so your Auntie Josie has been remiss. So so we've both misplaced the the first one anyway. His second wife was from over at Whakapara. Well, I don't know if she was from Whakapara, because Hetaraka is not a Whakapara name, it's an Akirama name. So I'm not too sure if his first was from Akirama.
Still Ngāti Hau.
Still Ngāti Hau, yeah. Yeah. And so if I just carry on talking. Now at Pehiauri, you know Janie Tana. Well, Janie Tana's father is the oldest of their family. And when the oldest of the older ones passed away, Janie Tana's father was sort of, before all the olds died, he was the one that was appointed to be the chief over there at Pehiauri. But he said, no thank you, because at that time, because there was a tapu on the whenua. Now, I don't know what that tapu, and I've tried to ask a lot of people, what's a tapu on the whenua? So I don't know what that tapu is. But I do know that when you go up to Grandpa Woody's place, that there are places on that road up there that's a bit chilly, you know, when you go up. But that is and they moved. Yeah, they moved from there. Yeah. And so he moved, Henare was his father's name, and they moved over to Hukaranui, over that way, over to Tinupai, around that way, which is still in Ngāti Hau, around Tinupai, not Tinupai. Oh, there's another place over there. Oh, yeah. I don't know if she's reading. It doesn't look reading here. No. No. No, when she's reading. When she's reading here. Oh, there's heaps of stories. Just stories. Our part.
Because they couldn't
Yeah.
change the names.
Now what is the land block? So what we're going to do now is don't read the fine print. We're going to look at the land blocks that there are.
One question before we go on, and it's just one, and it's just interest because of the time. Of Manarapa Whairoa and Prata, and then Prata, which one was the last pandemic during whose time?
Which one was the?
The pandemic, the last pandemic.
What's that?
Yeah, was it? The Spanish flu. During whose time was it? Manarapa Paiawa?
What year was
After
it?
him?
What year was the Spanish flu?
1920.
Oh no, that would have been at at our grandfather. Yeah, at Prata Minarapa. Hiremia Te Wake and our great-grandfather of the same generation.
So that's MARUATA.
Yeah, and you'll see in some of this other document, and I'll pass it around, those tupuna of that time from over Taitokero that are of the same generation as him. But I don't even know when the Spanish flu was.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, yeah, 1913 or 1940.
Yep, 1918.
Thank you. Have got my friend on the free door. We're ready.
So that's just the poet Te MARUATA, just to start this off. And so on this side are the blocks of land, that's the blocks of land that are Ngāti Hau, and on the other side are the names, and they're just done randomly, and they're put randomly on these po there, at the backs of them, because again, in 1865, people didn't live static lives. They didn't live in one place. They lived all over the place. So I don't know if we were living here, there, or up the tree, or down the hill. So they're just put on there randomly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, this is now to do with Hikurangi. Now, there's no map for Hikurangi because there wasn't one out of where I got it from because it was too late. There's 3 maps that aren't there. But Hikurangi is, again, what I'm saying, is that what we shared with Ngāti Kahu. And so over at Akirama, what they did was that the waterways over there, the tuna, they actually worked together with Ngāti Kahu about the tuna and everything. Yeah, and that's just a bit of history about, but these are so on each of these blocks here, there's also the boundary, okay, where they were. Yep. The next one, no, is it up, back up? Yeah. And so whareora, why I've got whareora here is that our tupuna Minarapa was actually on this block as a shareholder. Now apparently on this, and so was the Kake and Peniamone. They were the Ngāti Hau people on this block. That block is a Te Wairiki. If you read it, it's a Ngāti Korora. So Ngāti Korora only has 2 blocks of land in Whangarei. This is one of them. The other one is Whānui. And it's over the other side by Taiharuru. So that's what I put that there so that people know that at one stage we had an interest through our tupuna in that whareora block. And that's the boundary there again. The next one is Ruatangata. And there again, that was Ngāti Hau and Ngāti Manu. And it just, and really, when you look at it, when you're looking at these blocks of land, you have to have, I used to, when I first used to go in and research, I used to cry. I used to sit there and I used to cry on my own in this little room. Because when you're looking at something like this, 13 pence for an acre of land, and the acre of land is 5,000 acres. Do you know what I'm saying? You can't, and just as well as there on my own. Yeah, and sort of, you know, then this is what was paid for it, just £300. Okay. Next one there. And I think the next one is Hikurangi. And that again is the boundary. And at the moment, everybody's jumping up and down, I said last night, to get into Ruatangata because that's supposed to be where the new airport is going. Ngāti Manu and Ngāti Hui haven't said a thing about it, but everybody else is getting their 5 bits worth in. This is our block, this is our area, this is our... And I've got to listen. So when anybody's talking to me about that, I just got... So I don't say very nice things, yeah, about them. There's Hikurangi. We just talked about that. Yep. So if you have a look at this map, and I've used these maps, so this is the first one, Whitinga Ramarama. Now, the actual name of it on the survey map is Whiti Ngā Maramara, and it has to do with kumara. Okay, so that's what that has to do. And again, that block, if you have a look around, these blocks around the Ngāti Hau blocks. And could we just have just a bit? Yeah. And so there's a very strong relationship with Ngāti Kahu o Torongari because the kake whānau married into, or you know, their relationship, they married over there with Te Puia's wife, Te Puia's daughter. And so this is where, and again, this is, you know, when you look at that, how much it was, £23, but that's selling it to each other. So whether that really is our land or Ngāti Kahu's land is another thing. Yep, and again there's the, but it's Ngāti, that we got it, so Ngāti Hau got it. And then there's the boundary that's there as well. Oh, so the next one is Ngārangi Pākura. So this is on the opposite side to Pehiauri, the opposite side of the road. And that's Ngārangi Pākura there. And it comes down to the falls. There's the Whangarei Falls over there. It touches on over there. And again, that was, so we're looking at lands that were sold. And that was, at that stage, it was 309,000 acres, or 100 acres, not 1,000, but 125 hectares. Mm. Yeah, it's sold. So it's not we're not happy chappies. No. It was 309 acres. Oh, I haven't got it there. I wonder why. So these are when a lot of these went in 1865. So these weren't, and that's when the Māori Land Court opened in 1865. Yeah, and started to operate 1862, but in 1865 the Land Court was set up.
So this is the time of Manarapa Paiawa?
Pardon?
Or before Manarapa Paiawa, or during the time of Manarapa Paiawa?
At the time of Manarapa Paiawa.
And he was registered at that time?
Yeah, yeah. He was still alive then.
Yeah.
Yep. And so this is the MARUATA, and I've got a map back there as well, and I've got, and what I have got, but it's ripped, but I'm going to talk about it and I'll pass it around. Josie, is it in that box? Money Rose. Oh, she's busy too. I'll just go and get it. Lance, could you bring that box, please, dear? Or is Auntie using it? Just that map, please. Josie, the thing of Te MARUATA. You know, the two pieces? No, not the map. The two pieces of paper. It might be on the top. Okay. Now, I'm sorry for this, everybody. And the only reason I've kept it is because I've got to try and put it together in some way. So this is one of the very few applications to have title. And this is the Te MARUATA block, and I'm so sorry that it's like this. I was going to put it together. But you'll see there, if you have a look at the top, well, I'll think it first, but so the people in the Te MARUATA block were Rewi Taikawa, Haki Whangawhanga, Terawini, Perepe, and that Perepe is the Pōtis over at Rewarewa. Aterea, which is again Hinemore's Tupina's brother. Peneamene, Perikake, Hatama Tohora, Minarapa, Horomona, and that Horomona Kaiko is the Horomona from over at Solomon's Point. That's who looked after Auntie Edie, and Hone Pāpita and Hoani. So these are the, and then it's got in what the boundary of Te MARUATA was.
So is that those 13 Tupuna you were talking about?
Yeah. And I should have think, but I don't like to do it up with a sellotape.
Sorry, can we take a picture of it?
Yeah, you can. The reason why I've kept it, because I don't think I'll be able to get another copy. You know? Yeah. Those things, they were quite easy to get at one time in the land court. Like when I first started, you could just go in, get some books out and take them. But now you've got to go through the whole process of asking for a copy. But then you could just help yourself. Yeah. So, and so all of these places, and so every block of land, they have points on them which describes what they are. You know, what they are on each point. And could we just move that up, please? There. So you've got names like that are on that boundary, like Pū Taiti, Pumu Whakahewa, Whare Kokomahi, Waitangi, Huanui, Taurua. And these are the sort of like landmarks on this block at Te MARUATA. And I would think that whare kokomahi is to make korowai. You know, I don't know. But it'd be do something. It would have been some work that they did. It's hard to see that. Lauren's already told me, you know, it's too thing too. So these were the ones who weren't able to go in, which is Hoani Te Aumi, Hoani Pāpita Takahanga, and Aterea Te Arahi. Hoani Pāpita Takahanga was the chief before he died of both Ngāti Hau and Te Waiariki. Yep. Oh, that's just that's the entries that they had. Yeah. 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 Yeah,
48 acres.
yeah. But it's changed now, it's only 43. Yeah. But, you know, when you have a look, and there's only 2 lots that have been retained on that whole block. There's our block, and there's 10 of the kaki side. Yeah.
So what's the equivalent of 24 pennies to
Yeah, what is that?
today? Like what
Today,
value?
well, it would have been when we first had the dollars and cents, 25 cents. Yeah.
25 cents.
Now,
Those names, are they all whānau?
yes, they're all whānau, and these names here, they were all the old men. The old men. And some of them were chiefs in their own right. Like I was explaining before, this Horomona Kaiko, he was the chief of Ngāti too, over there at Pārua Bay. And, you know,
It's a big whānau, eh?
and it's Perepe Pōti, they still have land over at Rewarewa. And they've actually, Nicholas got in touch with them, and they've retained all these things just how it is as Perepe Pōti. Yeah.
So where the kakas come into it then? There's no kaka made there?
Yes, it does. They didn't here, Perukaki.
Oh, okay.
They didn't, you know, they didn't have the kaki. That was his name, Peru. Yeah.
That's where they come from, the kakis.
That's one of their blocks.
Oh, okay. From Peru.
Yeah. No, before Peru.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But they actually have 2 lines. They come from the Ngāti Kahu line, and they also come from the Tiraro line. Yeah. So this here is the number 4 block, and that went to Piniamane, but in actual fact it was retained by Miriana Paya, and that's the kake whānau have that. And then, you know, there's a block there too, I saw it on that picture at Huinui, 60 acres also, they all sold it, the 60 acres, to the orchard.
Huinui.
Yeah. Yeah. And here again, I talk about the urupa and the wahi tapu that's there on the maunga at Te MARUATA. And it's a reserve. It's still a reserve, the wahi tapu. But what happened was that it was put on the wrong side. The judge, instead of putting it on the left side, he put it on the right side. And the left side got sold, and the right side meant nothing, because it was already sold.
Is that the end of Edgington Road? That one?
Yes.
That maunga?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what is the name of that maunga?
Te MARUATA.
Oh, it is.
It's Te MARUATA. Yeah.
So when that block for that reserve, that urupa was incorrectly sold,
Yeah.
was there bodies there?
Yes. And the Mandanos, so myself and Alan went up, because Alan said the Mandanos, but where we went up there, I didn't think it was the place for the wahi tapu, and it didn't look like the place where the tōrere was neither, because a description is given of the tōrere, and it's surrounded by tōtara trees. Well, over there at the Mandanos, it comes down like that, and there aren't any tōtara trees because it's on a bank, so it can't be. But, you know, looking for it is a really hard thing. And, you know, our lawyer's taking his time sort of doing something, because they've even wrote to me from down in Wellington, from the Land Court, what is it that we want done? And our lawyer's just going, taiho, taiho. Yeah. And that goes on about Rui Taikawa and Miriana Pea and their firstborn, and yeah, he was 17. Henry was 17 when he passed away, and that Tanatu who agreed to succeed to take him on as his. He was one of the ones I talked about last night. That was one of the signatories on that whenua of Mahi Kawatis, given over for the thinking of the flagstaff that was taken. It was taken from down to Kawakawa, all that land there. Okay, there's another block of land. That's the Kotaiha block, next to the Pehiawari block, and it backs on to this block here, and Puke Tōtara up there. And that's the same, that's the boundary. And there's the Puke Tōtara block. And so Wiremu Pohe, so what it's saying there, that Ngāti Kahu were the original proprietors of that block, but they agreed that the proprietor was Kahupuri, so it came to us. See what I'm saying? It was sold, everything gets sold. Now this little block here, the Puketaha block, that's also a wāhi tapu on there as well. And Rui Taikawa's father is buried there, Rongo. He's buried on that block as well. That block should have, in the briefs of evidence to the Waitangi Tribunal, that block should have made mention that it was an old wāhi tapu. It is there written, but it's not really to any defined area. And the Te MARUATA block there, that's in the, so they put out all these volumes of books about every land block, and there's one section there that looks at wāhi tapu. So Te MARUATA's in that, and another wāhi tapu that's over in Waima. So there's a story in there too about the torere at Te MARUATA. So there's stories all over the place. It's just gathering them together. Puketaha. Yeah, Paura, not Rongo Paura. Now Paura Taikawa, he was also one of those that went to the battle at Ohawai, up that way before Ruapekapeka. Yeah. Pehiawari, there's the Pehiawari block there. And most of that was sold too. Before, most of it was sold quite early. Yeah. because his brother too was Himiperu. And Himiperu had a daughter, but she had no children. So if you go into Pihiauri in the cemetery there's that Miriana Unepu, that woman that's beside the 1 stones that are there. That woman there is this Miriana that's here there, Miriana Unepu, the daughter of Himiperu.
Are we stopping here on the way to MARUATA?
Pardon?
Are we stopping at the Iripa on the way to MARUATA?
Oh, sorry?
Are we stopping on the way on our trip out to MARUATA today?
I need to put it in the answer.
No, I mean we can relate that.
Yeah, if we see it. Yeah, it's good to see things. Yeah.
You know, how much of the Pihiauri block is still left in Whanua?
Oh, that one there, I think it's about 40 acres. That's that. No, that's the block at the back there. Yeah. Yeah, that's you know where Grandpa Wiri used to stay? But up the back of there, that's where their land is. And like they even, you know, as we do, scrap over land. And, you know, because the family want to build up there. But I think what they want is not viable. Because a lot of family, you know. Yep. So this is, oh, can we take it back? So this was in 1891. So that was the committee that was there at the time at Pihiauri. And there's our tupuna Parata Minarapa, which is our great-grandfather. And this last name here is who Uncle Ben was named after. And these other tupuna are the Perufau. So that was another name for Perukake that they used, the fau. So Perufau, and that had to do more with Tiraro, the fau. And Atana Tuhuna was the one who gave his name to Rui Taikawa's son. And these are just the ones at the time that were living there at the time. So that's how long we've been involved in Pihiauri. It's not like yesterday. Oh, and there's another one too, sorry. So in 1911, the church was robbed. Yeah, it was robbed, and by this couple, they robbed it. And they, you know, but they went to prison for it, you know. The church warden. So our grandfather was our great grandfather was the church warden, as well as the lay reader. Yeah, I felt sorry for them because I think there was crosses and things that they took and sold, and you know, people didn't have homes. Some people didn't have homes. 1911. Yeah. So there's Te Kohoao, and that's really. That's opposite the Glenbervie Hall here. And that's where that land, and it goes up to Maruata Road too, as it goes in. At that Glenbervie Hall, before I understand, they used to have their unveilings and over there. Outside when they came back from different unveilings. And we did that once over at the hall at Onerahi. And I was asking Uncle, and he said, well, they did that over here too at Glenbervie. Yeah.
So, Auntie, like with all these blocks being sold and with our tupuna being a lay reader?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that because he had that job that was able to sustain the land and all the costs associated with that land, which is why we could retain it all this time? Is that
No. His job as the lay reader, and that was just really to make sure that the money that was collected in the church during these services went back to the church.
So how do you, like before you said that whānau couldn't afford to pay for the expenses of the land, what made our tupuna different that he could retain the land?
You worked, you found work, you know, and the fact that our grandfather was a stone wall builder and was able to do that and got those jobs, he was able to sustain the land, you know, because it wasn't easy to do. It was hard, and Ngāti Hau suffered because they had so many survey rates and that to pay on some of these blocks. Because, you know, some people would just getting them and then selling them. Well, soon you're going to have a debt if you accumulate all this money. So they had to sell that land, or sell another block of land. Nice to choose.
And all those stone walls out Ngunguru Road, is that from our...
Yes, dear. Not only in Ngunguru Road, over at Kitaniko, out that way too. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, he was a hard-working man, our grandfather. And even this, like I said, this gang that he had, who went and volunteered their work to help Te Waiariki. You know, big mahi.
And that's Parata Minara.
Yeah, that's Parata Minara. That te koho ao, that also had something to do with Hunihiki, the MP. I don't know how he got there, but in the end, he was the one that, and that was leased out to the Hutchinsons at that time, so they were there at that period of time, and they leased it out, and he was the one who, who agreed, who signed to their lease. So there's a relationship there with Hunihiki through Ngāti Hau. See how it got to sell it? I just.
So there's a relationship with Hunihiki, and is there one with Kawati?
Pardon? What's that, Sid?
Kawati, is there a relationship with him through Pumipoto?
Is there...
Is there a relationship with Kawati?
Well, why Kawati went to Pukepoto had to do with bringing back the first person who was killed at the battle, and that was Tuhaya, who was Te Waiariki, and and so he brought him back, and they went to Pukepoto, you know, to honour Tuhaya. Now this tauranga block here, that's way over the other. Sorry, you've taken a massive leap into the unknown. So the tauranga block is around Otunga, over that way. And that's another block, and that's another block too. So that was a Ngāti Hau block. So Otunga, they had a number 1 block as well, and I believe that Otunga number 1 and Tauranga number 1 are the same blocks. Yep. So there's the Tihi block that's around us at Te MARUATA, and that's 438 acres, 4,138 acres, and here's all the different awas and roads. Now they use at I don't know why they do, but at Pihiawiri they should be using mangakino as the awa. It's not hatia, because the Hati is down the bottom. It's not that river that's going on the top, it's down the bottom of the falls. But hey, Now, okay, so this is a block that could be contested by Te Waiariki, because they weren't informed that Ngāti Hau were going to sell it. And this block here, this Taumata Hino block, was a block that Ngāti Hau did sell without reference. And so what you've got to get into your mind now, the land blocks that we're talking on this side, is that Te Waiariki and Ngāti Hau were like this. So in 1865, just before that and afterwards, they were like that, tight hairs. Not like now. All you get is from our cousins, that lot of Ngāti Hau. All they did was steal the land. So that's what you get from our cousins over there. But I would, and representing Ngāti Hau, this is something that I would bring up for Te Waiariki. Not because of anything. Well, the fact is that it's my tūpuna there too, but not for that fact. It's that there's an unequalness there that occurred, and it's really for the hapu to talk about it. Now they've got an opportunity, so they can talk. Yeah. When they were proclaimed roastlands like that block was, that was an opportunity for the Crown to step in and then sell the land. Rere Titi, so that there is, you know, when you're coming down that Vinegar Hill Road, when you're coming down Vinegar Hill Road, Rere Titi's on that side. It used to be they used to have a mill there, but you can see the actual river. And on that river there, they've got a beautiful waterfall. And the waterfall, this particular place, is where they have freshwater pippies and mussels. And these pippies and mussels were used by the olds as for health, for old people and babies. They ate them. So, yeah. Yep. So, this is the first of the blocks of land that was shared with Te Waiariki. And this is the first of those blocks where it was actually partitioned. So Te Waiariki had one side, Ngāti Hau had another side. And this is where Kawati, when he brought back to higher, brought him back to take him back to Waiariki, he made his kōrero about looking out to the land and and seeing that these people are going to come, and one day will be everything will be fine, but we need to look out to the sea, and these people will come and they'll make everything right for us. But that's a prophecy that Kawati had made, and people still talk about it now, that prophecy. But then there's also a prophecy that was made. So in Omanaya, and you might have heard of him, Te Atua Wera, or Papa Huri here, and he was the tohunga for Kawati, or for Hone Heke at Ruapekapeka. So he had a religion too, Atua Wera, in Omanaya, called Ngākahi. And sort of that's and so the wānanga of Te Ngākahi actually prophesied from that period of time, which would be about the Papa Huri here, the time of Ruapekapeka, just before that, that that this period of with the treaty would only last for 200 years and then it'd be finished. So I'm not too sure what that is, what that's about, but let's hope that a lot of people are actually putting in proposals to find some way to have things decolonised for us. There's one of the well, there's several historians, and one of them, Vincent O'Malley. If you ever get the opportunity to read his book, he just put out a book recently. It's worthwhile reading because he's one of these historians that have gone in and finally there's someone sympathetic to what Māori went through. And he's the one that talks about, you know, in the land court where there's lost things, and sometimes the judges didn't listen to anything, they weren't really interested. He's the historian that's sort of been very honest about the situation in the land court, and he's read through all the minutes in the land court and all the documents there as well. There's a couple of others that are just as good as him too. So that's the whakapapa. That so Rui Taikawa, this is how they do their whakapapa in the land court, and this is how they give it. And so he goes from himself right up to Waiatarangi, who was Kahukuri's first wife, right up to Kahukuri and Waiatarangi. And this Matamoi, so that was his firstborn. So he's at Pukepoto, there's a waterfall there, and that waterfall was known as Te Rere or Matamoi. It was named after her for the fact that she was born. Yep. And Waiatarangi is really from Ngai Tahuhu. So we had people like Whatarau, we had people from over at Ruapekapeka after the battles at Ruapekapeka who came over this way to cultivate on some of these cultivations. Yeah. And so this is what you call conquest. Well, this isn't by conquest, but this is by gift, where the chief, one of the chiefs at that time of Ngai Tahuhu, gifted he gifted the land to this whakawhiti and his son. And then it tells you also, if you look at that, it tells you also the different cultivations that there were, the names of them, the different past sites. Oh, that's not our past site, that's a Te Wairiki past site. But the areas where they had these things. And these up there, these names up there, Mōtiti, Hoani, Pāpata, Taka, Whatarau, they're all Ngāti Hau. Whatarau himself was considered to be a mercenary. So he was one of these ones that, you know, that he was like one of Kawiti's right-hand people. But he was an old man. He was an old man at the time of, not older, but becoming an old man at the time of Ruapekapeka. So this is what they did. They put people's names into blocks of land, and even though you didn't live in this area, so for example, Te Tāwaka and Eru didn't live here, they lived over at Whakapara. And then you come, and these are our Te Wairiki whānau, but if you have a look, they had him there too, and they also had Apatera, which is Hinemo's tūpuna. They had Apatera in the Te Waiariki names in this particular block, in the Pukepoto block. Yeah. Here's another block, and there's not much information about Umaikao, and that's a block shared between both Ngāti Hau and Te Waiariki. And to get there, you know, when you go up, when you're going out to Ngunguru, and there's that road on your left, and you go into the forestry, well, that's where Umaikao is. And it's a big place, it's a big farming community, it's a beautiful place. You know, makes you like to, yeah. So there was two people there, inserted in there, that's Haki Whangawhanga and Rawiri Te Hinu, who's from our Te Waiariki side. Yeah. Kōpua Toi Toi, which is there's Te MARUATA, so there's the block that's there, that's Huanui. That block is what the block that's down by the river, that's the river there, and that's the block that comes here. And so Kōpua Toi Toi was another block that was shared between Ngāti Hau and Te Waiariki, and it's a big block. And again, there's not much information. There's Kahakaha Roa number 2. I think that was shared as well, I think. I'm not too sure between. Oh no, it wasn't. No, they weren't admitted. And the reason why, and I find this really strange, the reason why they weren't admitted, because the tūpuna, as they said, it was a different tūpuna. So I don't know how you get a different tūpuna for Ngāti Hau. You're going off into another direction, you know, for another tūpuna. And those are the things that got Hoiaka Mahanga really annoyed, that got Te Waiariki really annoyed. What, you know, the things that we did as Ngāti Hau. Because if you have a look at some of those things, they're just pretty good at it.
Te Waiariki is that the mahanga?
Yeah.
Mahangas.
Yeah, mahangas, kirapetis, yeah, all of that lot.
Te Waiariki we sort of associate with out Hāpaua.
Yep.
Yeah. So the mahangas out there and the mahangas here.
Well, they're the same.
The same here.
Yeah.
You know when they talk about the raru that we told of putting people on lists, did that have anything to do with the Tino rule at the time? Was that still in existence then?
Yeah.
Is that why there would have been?
Yeah. It's a boo-hoo time.
Yeah.
Whakapai is another block that we shared with Te Waiariki. And Whakapai goes down, the Whakapai uruka that's down there. You know where you have to go over the river? To that cemetery over the river? That's the Whakapai block. Yeah. But now it's only Ngāti Te Waiariki that have retained their interest there. And so this is what they did with that block. They partitioned it to 2 blocks. One block to Ngāti Hau, the other block to Te Waiariki. So those blocks that we shared with Te Waiariki, they were partitioned. Yeah. Yeah, so those are all of the Te Waiariki. So, and now we've got, that's the pā at Ruapekapeka. Okay, and that's That's 8 hectares, but that's shrunken. It's shrunken so much it's not funny. And so in that block, and and I'll just talk about this for a while. So Hare Paraha was at that time was the chief over there at Peka Peka. And he was one of them. So Paraha at that particular time was a mark of WHENUA, and it belonged to the Paraha. So the cloak was the Paraha. So the dog of Paraha died and was put on his grandson's Paraha, the dog skin cloak, which was then placed in a rata tree. So these are the things so those are the tikanga that were practiced by our tupuna, those sort of things. That was another up there at HUI. That was another area there that was given as a pākuha or a gift to another one of Kahukuri's daughters that was born, Kahukuri. And so this block, it's divided between Ngāti Manu and Ngāti Hau. And in the Ngāti Hau, Ngāti Manu have, I think Ngāti Hau only have about 6 tupuna, and the rest are Ngāti Manu, but their shares are the same. So the shares in terms of Ngāti Manu, Ngāti Hau are the same. And Ngāti Manu have a different kōrero as well. They've got their own kōrero for huiarau. So, and it's not unusual for people for different hapu to have their own kōrero. Yeah. And so when, and I was just reading about him too, Te Riri Mahi Kawati. So what he did, Te Riri, he actually kept a journal of everything that had happened, that he kept a journal, but he had to ask, because he didn't know, so he asked Hohepa Mahanga and this Hare Whiro of Mutato, they had to tell him, where actually Huiaro was, because he didn't know where it was. And after this, so this Kirihi, that's Te Tāwai, Ngāone, and Auntie Ringi's, he had 3 children, and that the marae down at Waioomio, that's Te Tāwai Kawati Marae, named after his son. His daughter Ringi, and she used to be with my mum, they used to be good friends and stuff. So Ringi, Tāwhio had come up prior to the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, and they were talking about the kingitanga. So Tāwhio came up here and he went to see Kawati. And they had their kōrero and everything, and Tāwhio left this ring with Kawati. And somehow the ring ended up in the river, in the sea, inside a nika, inside the fish. And when they went to cook it and open it, the ring was there. And so that's who this Auntie Ringi is named after that event. Yeah. And Auntie Ngāone, so the other sister. So Auntie Ngāone, she lived over at Pātaua, over at Horahora. And her husband, and Auntie had several husbands. Her first husband was Tau Henare, Sir James Henare's father. But then she married Ray Mahanga, Sharon and them's father. And she was an old lady. They couldn't have been that old to have a young husband like Ray. And and they sort of lived together there. And when they split, Auntie lived just down from where the marae is supposed to be up the hill there. She lives down on the, she lived down there. She had a little whare there, Auntie Ngaone. She was a lovely old lady, Auntie Ngaone. We've done tauranga. So this is Taumata Hino. And this is the block of land that Ngāti Hau sold and didn't say anything to Te Wairiki. And if we could just go up for some of the kōrero there, please. So this is some history that's in there. And that's about the name of Taumata Hino, which comes from a rock placed in a cleft of a hino tree, and the old people saw it sticking out. Te Karu, which is, so all these parts here now are names of places. Te Karu, who was a tūpuna, he evoked, these young leaves of the fern, and that's what the name of this Umuwhawha, it's the name of the river and the name of the land area. He made a platform for the fern and gave the name Mirawhata. These names are still there. Next we went to the creek and ate fern, hence the name Kaimamaku. That's a river that's still there. And Te Miro Pāhui was a large miro on the hill that was frequented by birds, by pigeons. And that was the name of the pā that was given at that time there. And this here, the Tere Awatea, is after an eel, is named after an eel. And Kai Moko Moko is an eel catch. It's an eel catch full of moko moko, full of little eaglets, I think they call them, or eelets. Yeah, so. And then we've got Ruapeka Peka. So that's Hinemore's area, where Hinemore lives. And it's funny the way that the land, because in some of these things it's missed out. So there's some blocks you can't find any information on them, and some blocks that you can. And this is one of those blocks where the information is sort of in dribs and drabs, and you've got to really try and get to read as many books as possible to get the actual acreage of some of these places. Yeah.
Is block 1E, does that mean it was sold for 0?
What's that, dear?
Block 1E.
That's the partition of Ruapeka Peka number 1.
So there's 0P, what is that?
It's 1A, 1B, 1C. That's the name of the block.
I don't know, but the numbers next to it, where it says
Oh, that's 433 acres, North Roods, and 28 perches. That's how they did the land. Don't ask me what a North Rood is, or 32 perches, but it's the size of the it's the it's the size of the block. It's a surveyor's term. Oh, that's that Hone Ngāhina, who is the same as John Castle. So when we walk into the Urupa tomorrow, we'll see John Castle there. Thing. That's him. And that's when we talked about him going to do a Peka Peka and then selling his interest there and then wanting to get a refund and purchase it again. No can do. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So these are some of the things that they used to say. Let the natives, if they like, arrange a private sale as long as the land is settled upon. And really, all they wanted to do was sell the land. It didn't matter. Yeah. So Kiripaka, that's another block that we share with Te Wairiki, the Kiripaka block. And so if you go around, I've been on that ferry that goes around there on that boat, around the river. And you know, in those mangroves, oh, a lot of them are so old. You know, they're old, and it'd be good for us really one day to try and go on that boat, hope that fella's still alive, and go on his boat and go for a ride down there, because it's very interesting just to see what's there. Kiripaka is another one where there's a whakapapa there as well about it. And these are some of the cultivations that are there. Yeah, the coal. So there were coal mines there at Kiripaka, and when you go down, you go on that boat, and they'll show you where, how, what, and where. But that was a little township.
We need to go on your boat.
Yeah, it was a little township once, and they had a school. They had all sorts of things there. And these are names of some of the mines that they had. And you know, when you're going down the bottom there and you see all those arum lilies, well, that's where the school used to be. You know, it's lovely when you know some of the places that were there. And these are some of the names of their camps that they had. You know, Star of the Mountain, Man's Refuge. Yeah. Yeah, and then our area was sold. And this is Puhi Puhi, the Puhi Puhi block. And as I said, that's not a very good block to show what's what, but that would be about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now in this Puhi Puhi block, there's Ngāti Hine, there's Ngāti Wai, Ngāti Te Rā, Ngāti Hau has got the biggest portion of it, and like I was saying before, that Puhi Puhi 5, that was 2,000 acres, and that was Irunehua and Rui Taikawa, but it ended up really with Irunehua having their 2,000 acres and then distributing it to his family. So his family were well looked after. The Waiatu here, on the Waiatu, it's a river as well as a block of land. Our land, where our grandfather was, his land was down here, around by the Waiatu. And on that Waiatu, we have a shared interest now with Ngāti Hine. Yeah. In actual fact, some of Ngāti Hau went to a court to appeal the decision by Rui Taikawa and Irunehua to retain that land for themselves. They weren't happy chappies, and especially the in-laws. The mother-in-law wasn't happy. So this shows some of the, pardon? Yep.
We're talking about that Waiatu. Is there still that little piece that's still...
Yeah.
That odd...
Yeah. That crown block, yeah, I know. And I don't know, I've brought it up at a meeting that we should apply for it. You know, it's just sitting there. It's crown land, unclaimed crown land. You know, they're looking for somebody to have it. Who did? Did he?
Yeah, he was trying to go through to claim it for Ngāti Hine, but then he came up against Ngāti Hau.
Oh, well, that's your relation. No.
So I don't know what's happened with it, but there was an appeal that gone through for claims on that little piece, only because of that.
That's just when you go past, say, it's a flat piece.
Yeah, by the railway crossing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, we should follow that through. And here, so on that block there, you know, and so this is what they used to do. They'd talk about where you got kiwi from, where the eel wears, the rat snares, the bird and kiwi snares, where their burial places were, also their tapu. So this is the only block that has a tapu that I've seen. So still, I don't know what a tapu means in terms of a block that says a tapu. And I thought, well, maybe it's a torori, maybe but it can't be. I don't think so. I don't know. Before the cemetery down in Pehiawari was put there, what used to happen, and it's recorded in the land court, they used to have a hahu. They used to have a hahunga, and they used to, bury the body, bring the body out, scrape the body, and then take the body to somewhere to bury it. And I don't think they took it to Te MARUATA. I don't know, because I remember coming back one night and I got a funny feeling, and I got told that that's the pathway, that road into Tōtara Road, that was the pathway where they used to take bodies. So the only bodies I can think of that would go there would be to that torori but there were the other over in there in Te MARUATA. But I know that some of the people there went to Tukanui, which is over by the Cemetery Road in Manu, and that's where they were buried. And this here, and I know that some of the kakis are over there. And also we had a hui once down at Te Ringa Prawa, where a whole lot of mokai came back, just heads. And there was a whole box full like that, full of them. And none of the kaumata at that time wanted to, don't want to know. They didn't even want to come to the hui. And so only one that was game enough to come was Uncle Jimmy Munro. But on the day that they were supposed to do something, he arrived there late. So Taipere and them took everything, and they took that box of mukamukai, they took it over to Tukanui and buried it there. But I wouldn't like to walk on that, go having a look at something next minute, you're sort of looking at a box of heads, no hands. So yeah, this was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of acrimony that arrived out of this. And I know that Mahi Kawati, in the end, was quite unhappy as how things turned out. But I think what people forget, and I think it's something that we shouldn't forget, that a lot of these tupuna and people like Kawati, they didn't have the right, I mean that, they didn't have the right to go on anybody's whenua. But what they did, it was like, how can you tell somebody who's been defending you against all sorts of other people not to come onto your whenua? So, even Rua Peka Peka, Kawati still has something to do with Rua Peka Peka, not merely because he was there fighting, but because of who he is as a rangatira and as a chief. But I think Ngāti Hine forget, it's him, not them. Yeah. Yep. Oh no! So that mine over at Whakapara, that's not very nice, and it's having implications now. And apparently I didn't know, but everybody years ago used to talk about Whakapara as being a bit like this because of the mercury in the water that came out. I didn't know that. I thought it was normal. No. Oh, I don't mean that. Yeah. So these are the shareholders that were there. And this is when they opened up the. This is when they had the opening for the church at Whakapara, and also so they used to call that bridge there Pehiawiri Waterfall Bridge, the one there where that goes over the thing, yeah, and then this was the opening of the church at Whakapara, who was named after Erune, who was one of his sons had passed away. And he had a gathering of Latter-day Saints. Now, I'm not too sure with our tupuna what religion they were. Because if you have a look at Rui Taikawa, he's got Catholic markings on his stone. And I'm thinking, I never seen him be a Catholic because he's supposed to be a Anglican. So, I don't know, but they were all sorts of practices that they did.
Natives.
Yeah, natives. Yep. So that's that's Ngā Tāhuna, we looked at that with the tauranga block. But this whole Otonga and Opuawhanga, those are blocks, they were sold. We sold them, got nothing for them, and nobody knows what happened. So, and it's still a talking piece in the claim, so, But that again, that includes a whole lot of other hapu as well. Yeah. Oh, and there was a reserve there. They put in a reserve, the Te Hui Reserve, but in actual fact, what was supposed to happen by the Crown, for every block of land that they purchased, they were supposed to have a reserve for Māori, just their reserve. But that never happened. But they had one there at Otonga that was called Te Hui. Oh, there it is there. Yeah.
So
but that went too. Eh?
So the Crown sale, which is
Yeah. 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 I don't know. Yeah. So there's the Opuawhanga block, numbers 1 to 4. And they do some amazing things in Opuawhanga, I think anyway, and they're mainly Pākehās that live here. And I remember one year they had this advertisement and they were advertising Waitangi Day at the hall in Opuawhanga. Come along, you're all invited. And I thought to myself, that's forward-thinking people. That think like that. But that's the block here where nobody knows where anything went. Even the conveyance, all the information missing. Yeah. £6, 1,782 acres. It's terrible. Yeah. And so we look at Pipiwai. So Pipiwai number 2, that's over by Kaiko. And so that was a Ngāti Hau block, and that was gifted. It was gifted to Te Hape, one of the tupuna there at Pipiwai. And Pipiwai is really, when you're coming into Pipiwai, it's the river, it's a road that turns to your right. Down there is Pipiwai. But you see they have and it's here. Can you just pull it up, Doug? Yeah, so the Pipiwai applies to a large rock in the Pipiwai stream used for whetting axes and other weaponry. And so who we talked about first, Matamoi, who had the waterfall at Pukepoto. She's apparently buried on Pipiwai, number 2. And the pā, Kohukohu, who's another tupuna for Ngāti Hau, built a pā at Manukorihi. That's on Kaiko. I think those are the Kaiko blocks. And so here are some of these things that I'm saying, the marks on the land. It's like there's a hino tree, piko kaumatua, te rahui a te whiore, te repo a te rapat. So these are all names of, this is the name of a tree, and other markings. And what they used to do with markings too, so they'd mark off an area, say from here to there, and then they'd put like something like a toko, like a mere, and they'd put it in a tree as a boundary marker, you know. And here too, and I know that there's a place on Nuku Tawhiti, over there on the other side of Kaiko, called Kahukuri. Oh, and these are just some concerns about. Yeah. Is there anything else after that? Oh, there is. So what this is, so what this is really is me just in my thing asking, you know, how come this didn't happen? You know, it's just a sort of concern list about what we didn't get on different blocks. You know, what happens to the shareholders, the descendants who were dispossessed through no fault of their own. Yeah. So it's just comments, really. Yep. Oh, and I did have another one, but it's not there. So about the about all these tupuna, there is another. Are you ready, Josie?
Auntie, we're going to
Go.
push it out to tonight because it's lunchtime in like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And we'll switch whakapapa to
The strategic
7
plan.
PM tonight. Yeah.
Okay.
Dinner's at 6 tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, no, kau kia hau ki te kōrero ki a koutou. It's whānau. I hope it's been enjoyable. I'm a bit of a person, but yeah. Kia ora. Oh.
Very good.
No.
Very good. I'm about to do my washing.